Continuing our session on working with brushes, we saw some of the other functionality in the other session. This session I just want to cover a few other things. First thing I'm going to do is create another brush here. I'll be working with my Artistic Media Docker. I'm going to go ahead and just create a simple rectangle brush here. One of the things we want to be aware of is that the only way in which we can select or edit our brush stroke once we've set it up, it functions as a regular object. If you left click on it and move it around, it'll move like a regular object. But if you want to get to your wire or your lines and nodes that your vector rectangle has been attached to, you can do that with a pick tool by double clicking, and that'll bring those up, and then you can just simply left click and change your shape that way. Now, quite often what I do is I start trying to click around in the center of an object. If I click off on this, click off, go back to my shaping tool, and click in the center where that line is, I'll get to that. But the minute I click off to it, I'm not going to get it. I'm only going to get it if I click directly in the center where that is, or by double clicking with the pick tool, and that'll change my tool to the shape tool, and I can go ahead and get the nodes and start to change my brush. And then once I've got the shape tool, I can double click to apply a node, change that, and start to edit and change my shape of my brush. The other thing I want to take a look at here, and I'm going to go ahead and change this to a feather now, is that I can break my brushes apart on the lines that they're on. And I use that technique sometimes if I want to create some different looks. Actually, I'll just go ahead and go to some barbed wire here. Let's say I wanted to make this into two pieces of barbed wire going along this arch. What I would do is simply double click on this, go to my shaping tool, click in here, click add a node, then I could go to that node, right click on that, and select break apart, and now I'll have two segments of barbed wire on that same line. Now that's effective because sometimes I'm stretching an effect around a line segment or a line or some lines in a design, and it's not really working. The brush isn't long enough to make a good look or a good effect along the length, so a lot of times I'll break it up. Now once that's broken up, I can see these are now too big. I could go through and resize these just a bit, and that'll change the size of the barbed wire back down, and I did that by breaking my line segments apart. Now the other thing that I can do is I can right click here and select break artistic media group apart. Now once I've done that, I now have my line segment here, and you can see where I broke that apart right in here. And now these are two separate objects. Excuse me, this is one object, and I can ungroup this. And you'll see that we've got a group of objects here and a group of objects there. Now one of the really extraordinary benefits of working with brushes like this is I could take something like this barbed wire and create 30 different barbed wire elements and looks in a matter of minutes working off of one straight piece of barbed wire. But I'm going to be able to be aware of how brushes work and some of the things that are going on with my brushes. Now, one thing that I do want to be aware of also is when we're working with brushes, go ahead here, and I'm going to create another rectangle, a new rectangle brush here. I'll fill that with a light gray, and I'm going to give that an outline. I typically like to avoid outlines on brushes, but I'll give that an outline of, let's say, 3 millimeters. I'm going to convert that to curves and add some nodes to that, so it'll work better on its wire. Left click, bring this over, and I'll save this as a brush. Let's see, are we on the desktop? Now I want to go to my desktop brushes, go to my strokes, and I'll save this as box 3. Now that I've created that new stroke, I'll create a brush stroke with that. And I want to go over here and open my strokes and get back to that particular folder where I have that rectangle and apply that. Now you notice that when I take this outline here and I go ahead and left click and resize, that my outline doesn't scale with the brush. Now I didn't have on scale with image turned on. Now on this particular image, I'll do the same thing here. I'll go scale with image, open my artistic media, I'll create another brush, brushes, and I'll go to desktop, and come down to brushes, my strokes, and we'll save this as box 4 this time. Actually, I'm going to overwrite box 3. That way I won't get any confusion over to which box I'm selecting. Now I'm going to delete this because that's the old one. Create another brush stroke with box 3. Now I had scale with object turned on, but you'll notice that when I scale this, that outline is scaling, but I found that in some cases when they're very complex brushes, your outline won't scale with the object in the brushes. So if you do some scaling with very complex objects, occasionally Corel doesn't have this set up so that the outline will scale with object. As you can see there. Now, what's happening here is that when I resize this way, and you can see how I've got this set now, if I go and I change the node, I'll double click here and we'll see if we can recreate this or not. If I change the node, you can see my brush size changed. It changed back to the size it was. If I hit Control Z and go back, and we look at our brush docker here, it's set at 1.0, which is right there, but this brush is down in size. And I click on this and change it, boom, it goes right back up to the size. So if I resize my stroke size in Corel and go down with my size or up with my size and then change the brush, Corel defaults the brush back to the original size that the brush was created with when you created it in Draw. And you'll see me dealing with that as I'm working through some of the sessions here. Now also we want to be aware brushes will function with our fills and outlines. I can select this and I can, let's see, left click on a yellow, right click on a red, but if I've got a really complex brush with a lot of objects in it, it's going to change all my fills and all my outlines. So I'll typically want to break those apart or take them off of the artistic media wire, the brush wire, or my line before I start editing fills and outlines on complex brushes. And in our brush pack that we've got available on the site with over 400 brushes, there's some very complex brushes, just like the hand-drawn wing that you saw and some of the other effects that you saw that we were working with. So to go ahead and take a look at really how this works, now that we understand that, let's go ahead and create just a quick setup here, and we'll see that we've got some different things we've got to deal with when we're dealing with brushes. And I'm actually going to start working with a Wacom tablet now, and I'm just going to add some feathers to this baseball and we'll see what happens here. I'm going to go to my folders here, browse in, and I'll go to my feathers, and I'm going to go to, let's say, go to hand-drawn graphic and select OK, and I'm just going to grab a black brush here or a white feather, let me see here, and I'm just going to start creating a feather here to go off of this ball. And I'm doing this very quickly, not really paying a lot of attention to the artistic quality of what I'm setting up here. I just want to show you something else here. Once I've set these feathers or these wings up, I'll right click here, select everything, and I'll select order and go to back of page. I'll move that to another layer, that's fine. I'm going to left click, hold down move, hold down control, this is a right click, release and select copy here, come up here and mirror, and I'm just going to bring this in just a bit. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and resize here, and you're going to see what's happening after I do that. Now everything looks fine now that I've resized, but you'll notice if I go to this brush, double click on this, and then move or change that, my brush size changes back to the original size. And you'll want to be aware of that when you're doing your work with brushes. Also, if I do that over here, my brush also changes back to the original size on this side. Now occasionally what will happen over here on this side, sometimes when you've mirrored, it'll actually reset the brush and go back the other way with the curves. If it does that, then all you need to do is select your nodes and then reverse curve up here in the properties bar. So this will be session 2 in working with brushes, and we'll continue in our next session.